Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our What Works series, which we hold every other Friday, where you get practical advice from Eckerson Group consultants. So this is the lineup for this winter-spring series. At least these guys are smiling, otherwise it'd probably look like a police lineup. But we've had 3 episodes so far, very successful. And today we're going to learn about how to turn analysis into insight and action through my friend and colleague, Rich Fox. And then we have 2 more after that, one on data literacy with Josh Reed, and another on data architecture and creating data zones within your data architecture with Carlos Bossi. I hope you can join those. So just a little bit about Eckerson Group before we start, since we're hosting this. We are a research and consulting organization that specializes in data analytics. And our real claim to fame is we're a boutique consultancy. We only use senior consultants with 25 plus years of experience, a lot of guys with gray hair or without hair. As a result, we're really good at creating actionable data strategies for your organization or bespoke solutions for your clients. And in many ways, because of the research that we do, that we offer freely to the marketplace, we have become the consultant's consultant. A lot of consultancies refer to our work to go and provide their clients insights and direction. So we're pretty proud of that moniker. This is our team, or at least most of the team members, and these are the areas that we consult in. Over 200 years of combined experience among that group. These are some of the clients that we've had recently. Need to update this. And also for a special offer, Rich has agreed that the first 3 people who request a 30-minute phone call or Google Meet call with Rich, we will set that up for you. So I know Rich has some really valuable things to provide today. He and I have spent a lot of time focusing on dashboards and KPIs in our career, him more than I. And he's got an interesting methodology that we use in our consulting practice. So just a little background on Rich, and I'll let him expand on this, but he's been a CAO, CDO for many years. He also teaches in the graduate program at San Diego State University and started his career as a CPA and was a former CFO. So Rich, without further ado, welcome to this episode of the What Works series.
Hi, Wayne. It's great to be here, and we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics today is how do you really turn analysis into action to help the business in all of our organizations and our end users.
Okay, well, great. You are in the dark there, but that's all right. I know.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a sunny day and got the light behind me.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, I've got your picture up on the screen so people can get a good view of you now. All right, so you can take it from here, Rich.
All right, so analytics is asking 3 questions, and really when you think about it, most people want to know 3 things from data and information. First, how are we performing? What's happening? Second, why is that happening? And then third, what should we be doing to improve performance? And of those 3, the why is the most important. Because until you understand the root cause of why something is happening, you can't make a decision to improve it. But unfortunately, many dashboards that we all build, and I've done it too over the years, is that they don't address the why. They only tell the end user what is happening. And yeah, the dashboard might include sales performance or gross margin performance by different dimensions in our business, areas, product lines, product categories, regions, but it doesn't get into the why. And that's what we're going to talk about today is how can you build root cause analytics into your solutions? And we're going to look at one main approach called the Balanced Scorecard that is a very effective tool and guide to help us develop root cause analytics.
All right, so we're going to focus on root cause. analysis. We're not going to focus on the planning, forecasting, predictive, ML, prescriptive. That's for another session, right? Down the
Yeah,
road.
that's a whole nother session all by itself.
Okay, so I know you've used my dashboard methodology, which we talked about last time, the MAD, monitor, analyze, and drill to detail. When you say that most dashboards don't support root cause analysis, is that because they didn't design it properly, that they can't drill down into the analysis layer and the detail layer?
Exactly. It's not the software that is being used, it's the design. I've had people over the years tell me, oh, we've got, back in the old days, Cognos or business objects, and now it's Tableau and Power BI. And oh, the dashboards are not any good. The software's not any good. And I tell them there's nothing wrong with the software. It's the design that is not very good. So, yeah, it's all in the design. It's
Yeah,
just
but
like,
it's not just the ability to drill down. I think what you're going to talk about today is that you have to drill down with purpose, right? So you have to design your KPIs in such a way that you can actually anticipate and answer the questions that executives or managers might have when they look at the top level of the dashboard.
exactly. We're going to talk about creating cause and effect chains within our business and our KPIs and drivers so that when an end user drills down, it's more than just drilling down on a dimensional hierarchy. It's actually drilling down to understand the root cause of why a KPI is moving the way it is.
That's interesting. So it's not just because you have an OLAP tool, the old-fashioned OLAP tools or cubes or relational OLAP, doesn't mean you're going to get to the root cause analysis. You really have to be thoughtful about how you design your KPIs. And in fact, before you even think about a tool, you probably need to design your KPIs and these KPI trees first, right? Would you agree
Oh,
with that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before you start build designing or building anything for the tool, you should already have the KPI driver tree designed.
Right. So when I wrote my book on performance dashboards a long time ago now, 2005, balanced scorecard was one type of a dashboard. But I think when you say balanced scorecard today, you're using that as a technique to create that hierarchy of KPIs and that KPI tree, right?
Yeah, well, the balanced scorecard approach that doctors Kaplan and Norton created has a lot going on in it to help the organization. And I'm using just a couple of themes or concepts from the balanced scorecard. So, just a little quick background on the Balanced Scorecard. It was created by Doctors Kaplan and Norton. They were professors at Harvard. They wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review in 1992. They wrote a couple of more articles, and then they've written numerous books. It started out as a new approach to performance measurement, and it has evolved into an approach for managing strategy within the organization. Now, when it first came out in the 90s, a lot of companies, large companies, like I work with Boeing and American Express, implementing it in the late 90s, early 2000s, started to implement it. You don't see a lot of companies using it today because to implement it from A to Z, it's very complex. And companies realize that. But we're going to talk about today what ideas can you take from it that can help you design better analytical solutions. So, one of the concepts in the balance scorecard was you should group your KPIs and metrics into four perspectives that they called. And those are finance, customer, internal business process. And then here it's called innovation. It's also called learning and growth and capabilities. So the innovation puzzle piece here is essentially the people in our organizations. And this was quite revolutionary when they came out with this because in the early 90s, most analysis was done just with financial metrics. And most companies were not looking at these other areas. So today, all companies are looking at customer analytics and customer segmentation, customer lifetime value. But back in the early 90s, not many companies, if any, were doing that. Manufacturing companies were analyzing internal processes in their manufacturing areas, but most companies were not connecting people analytics to enterprise KPIs. And the Balanced Scorecard really opened everyone's eyes to this new approach.
Yeah, and nor were they connecting the KPIs together or linking them together in any way that you could do a cause and effect analysis, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to move on to the next slide, but everyone who's listening out there, if you do have a question or comment, just put it in the Q&A tab, and we'll get you right into this conversation.
So this is a great visual, which you could see the four perspectives there: finance, customer, internal business processes, and here it's called capabilities, which is our people. And in the Balanced Scorecard, like I said, it turned into a new strategy approach. It gets closely tied into managing the enterprise strategy and the corporate objectives and your metrics and your targets. But the point that this slide is making is if you start in the lower left with capabilities, our people, our capabilities drive internal business processes, which drives customer, customer drives finance, and finance drives capabilities. So it is an iterative loop. It's all connected. And when you talk to business people, they understand this. But when you look at most analytical solutions, this is not built in. I mean, you'll go and you'll see a marketing dashboard or a sales dashboard or a supply chain dashboard or a people dashboard, and it won't have metrics from the other perspectives. So they are not connected within the organization. And what I've always tried to accomplish is to build certain dashboards in the organization where we connect all of these drivers, and we'll see some examples on subsequent slides, so that end users can drill down from enterprise KPIs or their individual department KPIs down into the drivers that are impacting the KPIs.
So, Rich, I've always assumed that this kind of approach would be very appropriate for an executive level dashboard, right? The Uber dashboard. But you just mentioned that even the marketing, well, suggested that the marketing, sales, and every functional dashboard, and I do believe that every department should have its own Uber dashboard that contains 80% of the information that people in the department need. And I'm always surprised when I go to companies and work with them, they don't have that, not even close. But are you suggesting that even the functional departmental dashboard should have these four perspectives represented in them and the KPIs linked in a hierarchy?
Absolutely. As
Okay.
well as those dashboards need to be linked to the enterprise dashboards. So think about it that within an organization, you want to have cascading KPI frameworks. So you have enterprise KPIs, but then individual departments and functional areas have their KPIs also. And then all organizations create a multi year strategy and an annual plan. And in that annual plan, there are initiatives, tactics, objectives that all the departments need to execute on. Well, no plan is executed on perfectly. It just that's the nature of business. It just doesn't happen that way. And there's factors internal and external that impact the company's performance during the year. So to hit the annual plan, companies are constantly course correcting. Well, the individual departments, how are they going to know how to course correct if they don't understand what's driving their KPIs that they're responsible for?
Yeah. So yeah, we've worked we've worked with a couple of clients on creating this enterprise KPIs that go up and down the hierarchy within the company. Well, where would you suggest they start? Do they have to start first with the executive dashboard, and then it makes it a lot easier for each department to kind of pick up the KPIs that they need to drive at that level before they create their own? Or can they go from the bottom up?
It depends. So your data and analytics strategy should be connected and linked to the overall enterprise business strategy. So
Right.
depending on what that business strategy is, that will help one decide where should you start. So like let's say for example that there's the marketing and customer initiatives are by far the most important for a certain organization. one could argue to start there. Or if the key initiatives within an organization are spread throughout the value chain and the functional areas in an organization, then maybe you start at the enterprise level.
Okay. We have a couple questions here. One listener wants to hear more about the difficulties experienced while implementing a balanced scorecard.
Oh, well, that's a whole nother conversation. That gets quite complicated.
Yeah, I think what we're saying here is that we're going to take the best of the balanced scorecard and apply it to things that you can do today, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's Cognos and some of the older BI tools in the late 90s, early 2000s actually created balanced scorecard software. I helped Cognos. I was a Cognos Premier Partner back in 2000. I helped them create balanced scorecard software and just implementing it. There's a lot of moving pieces. It impacts all areas of an organization, and it ties in very closely to the updating of the multi-year strategy and the annual plan. So you've got to tie it in to the FP&A planning processes within an organization, and those are very complex already. So to implement the entire thing, there's a lot of moving pieces. And that's why I don't see many companies doing it today. But like I've said, there's certain concepts and themes in the balanced scorecard I use every day. And that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, it is interesting not to go down that rabbit hole too long, but Kaplan and Norton, if they had just stopped with their first book, which is basically what we're going to present today, I think that would have been fine for most organizations. But then they started to link it into the annual strategic plan, the annual budgeting plan, and that's when it got really cumbersome.
Yeah, it got quite complex.
Okay, another question. How do you see things like value propositions and products delivered to customers and their performance fitting in with this?
Well, they're closely intertwined because in those analytical products and solutions that we're delivering to our end users, what so when our end users ask for a dashboard, they really don't want a dashboard. They want answers. They want answers to their business questions and they want to understand their business. Why do they ask for a dashboard? They don't know what else to ask for. So it's part of our responsibility and job to determine what do they really need. And any analytical solution that we deliver should help them answer their business questions. And yeah, the first level of business questions is how are we performing and where and what product lines and product categories, but they're going to want to know the why. And the whys are in the operational drivers, which we'll look at in a moment, and they're not in the financial metrics like sales or gross margin.
Yeah, the finance metrics are what we call lagging metrics.
Yes,
And
and
what we
we'll
really
get into that
want
shortly.
people to focus on in the business is the leading metrics. What are the things that drive the lagging metrics?
Exactly.
So I think we should move to the next slide. There we go.
So one of the concepts in the Balanced Scorecard is called strategy maps, where we put the four perspectives together and we link the initiatives, KPIs, and metrics within the organization in a cause and effect chain. And the strategy map is always built in the same order. So the learning and growth perspective, which are people, are always on the bottom. Next comes internal business process, then customer and financial is on the top. And as we'll see on the next slide, all of the connecting lines turn into arrows that are pointing up. Why? Because our people do all the work and perform internal processes. Our processes serve our customers, and our customers generate financial results. And then all of that is tied into the mission, vision, and strategy within an organization. So it really connects together what is happening in a company and what are the drivers. There's been many times where I'll be talking to marketing, and of course, marketing's job is to drive sales, and they want to understand how certain of their initiatives are impacting sales and why is it or isn't it hitting the target for that initiative. And many times the answer is not in marketing or customer metrics, but it's in the drivers of those, and it's down in internal processes and down in people metrics.
There's one comment here, Rich, that I think it was this slide reminded the listener of a business model generation diagram. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Here's your
So,
strategy.
so here's another strategy map, and now we've got the arrows pointing up. And as we've already talked about, we have leading and lagging indicators, and lagging indicators are the financial metrics, and the leading indicators are in the other perspectives. So customer, internal business process, and organizational capacity or learning and growth. And what Kaplan and Norton said is that approximately 75% of your KPIs and metrics that you're monitoring and managing should be leading versus lagging. And it's sort of simple. We have four perspectives. So three of the four perspectives are leading indicators. So that's 75%. But they wanted companies focused on the leading indicators because if you're only looking at financial metrics all day, you don't know what levers you have in the organization to pull to improve the financial metrics. So you don't improve sales by analyzing sales data. You improve sales by understanding the drivers of sales and what drivers or levers are impacting sales in a positive way or in a negative way. And then you'll notice in each of the circles in the strategy map, those are really not KPIs or metrics. Profit is, but the other ones are more initiatives or tactics. So many times in the strategy map, you'll design it with initiatives or tactics within the organization and then connect KPIs and metrics to it. And that's one of the other beauties of the strategy map is that all companies have annual initiatives and tactics tied to hitting their plan, and all departments have their own initiatives and tactics. The strategy map pulls all that together in a cause and effect chain, as well as connects it to the KPIs and metrics in the company that are going to help us understand performance, as well as hold people responsible for performance.
Well, you make it sound so easy, Rich. So
Yeah.
and these are all objectives here that we're looking at, right? That would flow right from a enterprise or departmental strategy, right?
Most of them are more initiatives and objectives. I mean, increase profit. Yeah, you can measure profit, though one could say, well, how are you going to measure profit? Is that EBITDA or is that another
Right.
metric?
Yeah.
But
But
yeah, most of these are
my
initiatives
question
or
is this though,
objectives.
just to create this diagram, how long would that take? Say it's a marketing department, not even go to the executive level. This is the marketing department. In your experience, you get a team together of the key stakeholders in marketing and you hash out, you know the strategy. That I guess that's an assumption, right? There is a strategy that's been defined with objectives, perhaps, or maybe this is the strategy. Maybe this is part of creating the marketing strategy is to create this diagram. How long does that take?
Well, so that's an interesting question and actually brings up an excellent point. So if you go to marketing, they know marketing really well, but they don't know what goes on in operations or supply chain or R&D or in HR. You talk to operations and they know operations well. The data and analytics team, we're in a unique position because we work with all these groups throughout the organization. So a lot of times when you meet with, let's say, marketing in our example, they may not know what drivers in operations or in HR or in other departments are impacting their KPIs.
Hmm.
So we need to work with the enterprise to actually piece this together and understand it. So I worked at an amusement park company for a while, and we were building a customer 360, and marketing was our main customer for the customer 360. And one of the drivers, one of the tertiary drivers in the KPI driver tree was labor optimization. And we identified that, not marketing, because marketing had no idea about labor optimization. But in a hospitality company, labor productivity is one of the main drivers of revenue growth and customer satisfaction. So that's where we bring a lot to the table. And it's not only working with the department that wants the analytical solution, but it's also understanding how other processes throughout the value chain in organizations impact other KPIs and metrics.
Yeah, that's interesting. So even if you're taking a functional cut of this scorecard, you really need to bring in enterprise views of it. But I would argue too, though, that marketing and most departments have their own operations. It's just a minuscule part of the overall corporate operational perspective. But like marketing operations, running the campaigns and tabulating the results and things like that.
But those are not the operations that I'm talking about here. So if we take my amusement park example, I'm talking about the operations in the park that marketing has nothing to do with. So
Yeah,
it's scheduling the labor, it's labor productivity, it's how the business is actually being managed.
right.
And you're right, marketing has operations and campaign management and all the other marketing initiatives they've got, but they typically do not know what goes on in the actual operations area or in R&D, supply chain, HR. So that's where we are in a unique position to understand at an enterprise level. Now, one might be thinking, well, I just joined a new company and I haven't had an opportunity to meet all the different departments and functional areas. How am I going to come up to speed to be able to do something like this? My recommendation is go and spend time with the FP&A team, so financial planning and analysis, because
Mm,
they're responsible for the annual plan and they need to have an understanding of how different areas of the company impact KPIs and drivers to put the annual plan together.
yeah,
The thing is that, and I came from finance, so I was a finance person once, is that they're not thinking about it from an analytical solution perspective or from a KPI driver tree or strategy map perspective. They're thinking about it from how does it impact their annual plan? But those two are very closely connected. So you can learn a lot from the FP&A team and how they do planning, and also too in the work we do in KPI driver trees or strategy map approaches, we can also help the planning team. So it's a win-win for organizations.
yeah. And just so people don't know, FP&A is financial planning and analysis team. Yeah. So a comment here, the strategy map example provided showed various linked goals and objectives. How do we turn that into linked KPIs? So I think we should go to the next slide because I think it shows that, right?
Yeah, so this is also part of the Balanced Scorecard and strategy maps is that it's closely tied into the annual planning and the initiatives and tactics as we've been talking about. And a metric has no meaning unless it has something to be compared against. The annual plan or budget or a target or an industry benchmark, or maybe you're comparing it to last year if you're looking at year over year sales growth. So one of the approaches in the Balanced Scorecard pulls all that together. And that's another beauty of the Balanced Scorecard approach. And this is also where the work that we're doing from an analytical perspective ties into what the planning team is doing from an annual planning and the enterprise strategy perspective. And this really helps us develop analytical solutions, not only for all the departments, but also at the enterprise level for the executives, because they want to understand what is happening to the strategy. Why are we hitting our targets or not hitting our targets? If you go to any quarterly board meeting, a lot of financial numbers are presented because the board wants to know how are we performing from a financial perspective. But the first question the board will ask is, why are these things happening? Why is revenue up and down? Why is gross margin up or down? And to be able to answer the why question, that's where we need to understand the root cause.
Yeah. So I remember working with some organizations and they had a hell of a time defining targets. Measures were hard enough, right? And then it's like the business people were too exhausted to come up with targets. I remember the one chemical manufacturing company, the director of BI got kind of exasperated, and he just made up the targets. And he told the board that, anything above 10% was green, anything below 10, minus 10% was red, and everything in between was yellow. And they said, "Oh, good, fine, that works." So targets can be a little bit challenging to create, and some of the targets are, if you're increasing, that could be good, but it could be bad depending on the nature of the metric. So
targets can be challenging, and you don't want to make them unrealistic, so too high or too far, because part of the goal of a target is to motivate people to improve performance throughout the organization.
Yeah.
So you don't want to make them too difficult to hit, but you don't want to make them also too easy to hit also. And that's also another area that we can help, because we can do some analytics and statistical analysis and look at correlations to determine what is a reasonable target.
You want to move to the next slide?
Sure. So here's a list of lagging and leading indicators. And as we've been discussing, the lagging indicators are financial metrics like sales, profits, etc. And leading indicators are in the other perspective. So it's customer satisfaction, customer complaints, order cancellations, employee satisfaction. Now, I have some people tell me, well, wait a minute. Those leading indicators, those numbers are in the past. We're looking at last month's customer satisfaction or last week's order cancellations. Yes, we're always looking at historical data, but they're called leading indicators because they are a leader or a predictor of financial metrics in the future. So I'll tell you a quick story. Boston Chicken years ago, they had a employee survey in their POS software, and employees would take a quarterly survey. And no surprise that when employee satisfaction declined in a restaurant, a month, 2 or 3 months later, sales started to decline and customer satisfaction started to decline. And when they looked at it, the employee survey and satisfaction was the most highly correlated metric to predict sales and forecast sales. So that's why they're called leading indicators, because they're predictors of future financial results.
Now, it's interesting because I look at order cancellations and I say, well, that can be a lagging indicator in its own right, because we would really want to find stuff that is the driver of order cancellation. So I think actually, if you go back, you could, depending on your perspective, they're definitely lagging indicators in all cases. But the customer indicators, right? They could be lagging indicators, and the internal processes would be the drivers or leading indicators for those. And then so on and so forth down the line, right? So the organizational metrics would be drivers.
That's why the strategy map is always built the way it is.
Yeah.
So the drivers of the customer metrics come from internal business processes, which come from learning and growth or people. So I don't know if I would say that the ones on the right are both leading and lagging. Just I look at it that they're all leading indicators, but that doesn't mean that you don't go deeper.
Right.
So typically when I build KPI driver trees, which we talked about in the previous What Works seminar, I go down 3 levels in the driver tree. And the deeper you go down into a driver tree, it's typically more actionable. And we've got a couple of use cases in a subsequent slide, which will illustrate that.
So you're saying for each of these, like this circle here, you would go down 3 levels of KPIs to really understand what's driving that.
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's keep moving on here.
So here's a couple of use cases, and apologize that this is a little bit hard to read on the slide, but you'll be able to get the slides after this. So on the left-hand side is a balanced scorecard approach, And we've got the four perspectives there: finance, customer, internal business process, and learning and growth. Most of the arrows are pointing up because the perspectives lower in the strategy map are drivers of KPIs and metrics above it. And the main one here in the upper left is revenue growth. And we're decomposing the drivers of revenue growth. And notice how it gets down to that the most actionable are the ones that are down in internal business process and learning and growth. And so if you really want to improve revenue growth in this organization, and this is a hotel example, I should have mentioned that earlier. And in the hospitality company, people are critically important because the people are serving all the customers. And some of the main drivers here of revenue growth are down in learning and growth, like improving employee quality, employee satisfaction, training, and cross training. So even though those are not directly connected to revenue growth and they're connected through internal business processes and customer, if you want to really improve revenue growth, the lower you go in a strategy map or in a KPI driver tree, those metrics are typically more actionable. And that on the right-hand side is a typical finance approach of decomposing gross margin. So on the right-hand side is not a balanced scorecard approach. You don't see it broken down by customer or internal business processes. But typically when you decompose gross margin, you want to decompose it into impact from sales, mix, gross margin percentage, and then this one also has a customer aspect looking at customer churn. And then you want to decompose mix into different areas of mix. And in this example, we're breaking it down into country and brand and items and then account mix. And then, of course, as your costs go up or down, your cost of goods sold, which impacts your gross margin percentage, that also impacts the gross margin dollars, which is the box on the left of this driver tree.
Okay.
So some key takeaways. So first there, to understanding how to positively impact your KPIs, you want to be able to drill down and dive deep into the operational drivers to really understand what is driving the performance of your financial KPIs. Second is you want to identify the relationships between KPIs, metrics, and performance drivers so you can drill down to understand the root cause. And then lastly there, you want to extend and expand line of sight from the lagging indicators, which are typically financial metrics, to the leading indicators that are operational metrics in areas like customer, internal business processes, and learning and growth to really provide actionable insights. Financial metrics are not actionable. If you go to somebody in a company like in marketing and say, we need to increase sales, they want to know, well, what levers do you want me to pull? Do you want me to increase orders? Do you want me to increase customer acquisition? Do you want to improve customer retention? Do you want to increase basket size by running some type of promotion? Those are the levers that you're going to pull to improve a financial metric like sales growth.
Okay. I actually want to go back one slide here because this diagram on the right, how does that correspond to what's on the left? Is it meant to be a mapping of left to right?
Oh, no. The left and right here have nothing to do with each other. They're two different use cases.
Yeah.
The one on the left is a balanced scorecard approach to root cause, and the one on the right is more a traditional finance approach to decomposing gross margin and understanding what is impacting gross margin.
Right. So the one on the right is really just as you say, a decomposition of gross margin metric. So this metric is really made, I don't know if it's contributed, these are the components of that metric, or these are just things that drive it from a financial perspective.
Well, there are components of it.
Yeah.
It's
Sales and
when
costs, right?
yeah,
Okay. All right. So are you recommending not to do the one on the right and do the one on the left?
it just depends on what you're trying to answer. What is the business question? So I've done both of these as
Okay.
well as other approaches. So the point of this is that there's multiple ways to get to root cause and to analyze root cause. So we've talked mainly about the balanced scorecard approach today, which is an excellent approach to use, but the one on the right just simply illustrates that there are other ways to get to
Okay.
root cause.
Okay.
When I'm meeting with end users, I have a strategy map in the back of my mind all the time. And I am thinking about, have we identified all the important drivers for the area of the business that we want to analyze, or we want to build a dashboard or an analytical solution? Because even if the end user is not asking for root cause, I know that's what they really want. And that's why a lot of dashboards are used for a short period of time and then never looked at again. And if you go out to your BI solution and you look at what's being used, and you'll see a lot of dashboards that have not been looked at for weeks or months. And it's because they don't tell the end user the why. Why are things happening? And the root cause behind what is happening to the KPIs that people are responsible for. So when I'm meeting with end users, I've got the strategy map in my mind, and I am essentially going through the different perspectives and identifying the key drivers in the business for the area that we're talking about at the time.
Yeah, I see a lot of those dashboards that are underutilized, and some of it's because they just don't contain the core operational statistics that people really want. They were created for specific projects, right? But there's no comprehensive departmental dashboard that gives you 80% of the information you need just to do your day-to-day job. I see that all the time.
Either that or where it's just simply providing information about what is happening, but it doesn't include the why. And
Yes,
and I don't mean that, I'm not implying here that the what is not important. Yes, it is important. And we want to understand for our KPIs, where are they hitting target and missing target. So you want to take the key dimensions in your business, product category, product line, region, division, whatever they are, and you do want to slice and dice your KPIs in that fashion. But if you stop there, you really have missed an opportunity to help the business and our end users really understand what's driving the financial
right.
KPIs and what can we do to improve it. I worked for a CEO once, and he liked to say, how high is high? And if we were beating plan, he was never happy. He would say, why can we go higher?
Yeah. One thing I learned about metrics is that they have a lifespan. If they're good metrics and people work towards improving their performance against them, eventually they reach their close to their goals and max out their performance against that metric. And then that metric becomes less useful. And you probably need to change it out to kind of give people new incentives
In
to
certain
perform.
areas of the business, but some KPIs and metrics live on forever. Every company I've ever worked with, either as an employee or consultant, are trying to do two things: grow revenue and improve profitability. And that's typically trying to improve gross margin. And those KPIs will never go away. Every company is managed by that, as well as like customer satisfaction, lifetime value, employee satisfaction. Those are always important. But you're right, there's other metrics based on your initiatives and tactics that are important for a period of time, and then the strategy of the organization moves maybe in a new direction, and then things change.
Right. That's the other reason I was going to say is that sometimes the strategy changes or the business changes, the conditions in the market change, and the metrics become less useful. So you have to continuously update your metrics and review them. And that's one reason maybe the balanced scorecard disappeared. Is that, especially at the strategic level, those metrics may not be relevant for very long. So it takes a lot of time to maintain that scorecard and maintain the metrics and make sure that you keep them up to date. I will say, yes, the lagging indicators definitely don't change, but probably a lot of the leading ones would. So Connie asks, this is perhaps not on topic, but do you also look at potential unintended consequences of initiatives? You know what pops into my mind is that sometimes your metrics can have unintended consequences, right?
Well,
'Cause
yeah. I mean, so I've worked in hospitality. The graduate program that I teach in at San Diego State is in the hospitality college. And in hospitality, you have to be really careful because if you go to a general manager of a hotel or a restaurant or a casino and you tell them their labor is too high, they'll say, fine, I'll give you lower labor, and they'll cut back on labor. Well, what happens? Less labor in the wrong way, and you have lower customer satisfaction, and in a few months, sales are going to be down. So, yes, you do need to be very careful in how metrics are presented to the business and to help them understand it. So, like from a labor perspective, in any company, hospitality or manufacturing, you don't manage labor by looking at the labor dollars in your income statement or your P&L statement, but you look at labor productivity metrics. That's how you improve labor cost in the income statement, is by improving labor productivity. So you might want to tell them that they're scheduling, they can improve scheduling of labor certain days of the week or in certain shifts or whatnot. Manufacturing companies analyze labor very closely and manufacturing costs very closely. So, yeah, you do want to be careful with KPIs and metrics as well as initiatives and tactics and make sure that everything is aligned. That was another theme or concept in the balanced scorecard, and you could see it in the strategy map with everything connected, is to try to avoid that from happening.
Yeah, you have to kind of look at your KPI set holistically and make sure they're balancing off each other so that one metric
Exactly.
doesn't undermine another and have unintended consequences. It's like the old call center example where very expensive operations, right? So if you can reduce a number of calls or the time spent resolving calls, you're going to save a lot of money. So in the early days, call centers had metrics for speed of resolution, right? Or number of calls completed. Well, that just incented the call reps to essentially not really resolve the call, but just complete it, right?
Yes.
And almost to the point of hanging up on customers. And of
Yeah,
course,
that's a good example.
call centers then had to add quality metrics, right, to balance out those speed incentives. All right. So I think that's all we had. Yeah. So I'd like to thank you, Rich, for great presentation, a wonderful conversation. Thank you all in the audience for joining us again and for your comments and questions. And again, we'd like to make that offer. If any of you would like 30 minutes with Rich, please say something in the chat, and Julie will schedule a meeting with you and Rich. So with that, just want to say our next event is April 19th with Josh Reed. We're going to talk about data literacy operational practices. So until then, have a great day.
Thank you all.